Zekthara adjusted his observation equipment and sighed. Another boring assignment from the Confederation Intelligence Division. This time he had to watch humans fight. Humans. Those strange pink creatures who had just joined the galactic community 3 years ago. The young Vorthak checked his datapad again. The mission details were simple enough. The Kralix Empire had declared war on human space. The humans were about to face their first real battle against a proper galactic military force. Zekthara's job was to observe, record, and report back on human combat effectiveness. He almost laughed. Combat effectiveness? These humans barely had real weapons. Their ships looked like metal boxes with engines stuck on the back. Their soldiers were small, weak, and died if you looked at them wrong. The Kralix would crush them in days, maybe hours. Observer Zekthara, report to Docking Bay 7, came the announcement through his ship's speakers. Time to transfer to the human fleet. The docking bay of the human flagship was nothing like what Zekthara expected. Instead of the clean, efficient spaces he knew from other species' ships, this place was full of noise and chaos. Humans ran everywhere, carrying boxes, shouting orders, and making more sound than seemed necessary. A tall human female approached him. She had short gray hair and wore a dark blue uniform covered in small metal shapes. "You must be our observer," she said. "I'm Admiral Kate Morrison, Fleet Commander." Zekthara activated his translator and bowed slightly. "Observer Zekthara of the Vorthak Scientific Corps. I am here to document your combat operations," the Admiral smiled. Humans did that a lot, Zekthara had learned. It meant different things depending on the situation. "Welcome aboard the USS Guardian. Captain Ryan Torres will show you around and get you set up." Another human appeared beside the Admiral. This one was younger, with dark skin and bright eyes. "Captain Torres reporting, Admiral. Ready to give our guests the tour." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Zekthara made mental notes. The walls were covered with pictures, images of other humans, places, and strange symbols. Some humans had hung small objects from their clothing or equipment. It seemed wasteful and inefficient. "Those are personal items," Captain Torres explained when he noticed Zekthara staring. "Photos of family, lucky charms, that sort of thing. Keeps morale up." "Morale?" Zekthara asked. "How the crew feels. Happy soldiers fight better than sad ones." This made no sense to Zekthara. Emotions had nothing to do with combat effectiveness. You fought because it was logical, necessary, or profitable. Feelings just got in the way. They entered the ship's command center. Humans sat at various stations, watching screens and pressing buttons. Some talked quietly to each other. Others stared at displays showing enemy ship positions. The Kralix fleet was 3 times larger than the human force. "Sir," called out a human female from one of the stations. She had blonde hair tied back and looked very young. "Lieutenant Amy Carter reporting. Long-range sensors show the Kralix are moving to attack the civilian ships near New Haven Colony." Admiral Morrison's face changed. The smile disappeared. "How many civilians?" "About 50,000, sir. Mostly families and children." Zekthara watched the humans exchange looks. Something was happening that he didn't understand. The logical choice was obvious. Retreat and save the military ships. Civilians were replaceable. Warships were not. Options? The Admiral asked. Captain Torres pointed at the tactical display. "We could withdraw to the outer system, regroup with the Second Fleet in about 6 days, and leave the civilians. The Kralix don't usually harm non-combatants. They'll probably just enslave them or relocate them." Admiral Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Zekthara waited for the obvious decision. But then the Admiral spoke words that confused him completely. "No, we hold the line here. All ships are to protect the civilian evacuation." The command center went silent. Zekthara looked around at the human faces. They all seemed to understand something he didn't. "Admiral," Captain Torres said carefully, "we're outnumbered 3 to 1. The logical choice would be to retreat and preserve our forces." "Since when do humans make logical choices, Ryan?" The Admiral's voice was calm but firm. "Dr. Grant, please escort our observer to his quarters. Brief him on human military psychology." A new human approached. This one was older, with kind eyes and graying brown hair. Dr. Lisa Grant, military psychologist. "Come along, observer. We have much to discuss." Dr. Grant led Zekthara to a small room with a bed, desk, and viewing port. The space was simple but functional. She sat down and gestured for him to do the same. "You seemed confused back there," she said. "Your admiral made an illogical decision. Your fleet cannot win against superior numbers. The correct choice is retreat. Dr. Grant nodded. From a purely tactical standpoint, you're absolutely right. But humans don't operate on pure tactics. Then how do you operate? On principles, values, things that matter more than winning or losing. Sekithara's translator struggled with some of her words. I do not understand. Those civilians down there? They're not just numbers in a report. They're someone's children, parents, friends. We know them. We care about them, and we've promised to protect them. But they will die anyway if you lose the battle. Maybe, but at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have given them a chance. Through his room's viewing port, Sekithara could see the human fleet preparing for battle. Small fighter ships launched from the larger vessels. Weapon systems powered up. Ships moved into defensive positions around the evacuation zone. This is not how military forces should behave, he said, more to himself than to Dr. Grant. No, she agreed, but it's how humans behave, and that might be what saves us all. As Dr. Grant left, Sekithara began his first report, but the words wouldn't come easily. How could he explain that an entire fleet had chosen almost certain death over logical retreat? How could he describe military decisions based on emotion rather than strategy? Outside his window, the first Kralix ships appeared on the horizon. Soon he would see humans fight, and he was beginning to suspect that nothing in his training had prepared him for what was coming. The young Vorthak settled at his desk and began to write. His report would be thorough and detailed, as always. But something told him this assignment would be different from all the others. Something told him he was about to witness something that would change everything he thought he knew about war, about logic, and about the strange species called humanity. The battle was about to begin. The first battle started before dawn. Sekithara watched from the command center as red dots appeared on the tactical screen. Kralix ships moving fast toward the human fleet. All hands battle stations, Admiral Morrison announced over the ship's speakers. This is not a drill. Humans moved quickly through the corridors. But Sekithara noticed something strange. They weren't panicking. Instead, they seemed focused, determined. Some even seemed eager. Fighter squadrons launching now, reported Lieutenant Carter from her station. On the main screen, Sekithara watched small human fighters stream out from the larger ships. They looked tiny compared to the massive Kralix vessels approaching, like insects flying toward giants. Sir, we have a message from the Kralix commander, said another human at a communication station. Put it through, Admiral Morrison ordered. A harsh voice filled the command center, speaking in the Kralix language. Sekithara's translator converted it. Human fleet, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. The Admiral looked around at her crew. Several humans smiled. Some actually laughed. Send this reply, Admiral Morrison said. Kralix Commander, we politely decline your generous offer. Come and take us, Sekithara was shocked. The humans were actually making jokes while facing death. This was not normal military behavior. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up space. Kralix energy beams lanced out toward the human ships. The humans fired back with projectile weapons. Primitive but effective. Several small Kralix ships exploded, but more kept coming. Direct hit on Fighter Squadron 3, Lieutenant Carter reported. We've lost Jake Martinez. Sekithara expected this news to demoralize the humans. Instead, something else happened. The remaining fighters pressed their attack even harder. One pilot's voice came over the communications. That was for Jake, you alien bastards. Language, Peterson, Captain Torres said, but he was smiling. The battle continued for hours. Sekithara watched human ships take damage that should have forced them to retreat. Instead, they kept fighting. When the USS Denver lost its main engines, it continued firing weapons until a Kralix cruiser destroyed it completely. But what disturbed Sekithara most was watching the humans themselves. In the corridors, he saw crew members sharing their food with injured comrades. In the medical bay, doctors worked on wounded soldiers while tears ran down their faces. In the weapon stations, gunners talked to their equipment like it was alive. Why do they speak to the machines? He asked Dr. Grant during a brief break in the fighting. Humans bond with their tools, she explained while treating a burned technician. That gun isn't just a weapon to them. It's their partner, their protector. They give it a name, take care of it, trust it with their lives. This seems inefficient? Maybe, but it makes them fight harder. A human will die before letting his weapon fall into enemy hands. As if to prove her point, an explosion rocked the ship. Emergency lights flashed red. Through the ship's speakers came a report. Hull breach in Section 7, reactor overloading. Zekthara expected immediate evacuation orders. Instead, he watched Chief Engineer Pete Williams volunteer to go into the damaged section alone. "Sir, someone needs to manually shut down the reactor," Williams reported over his radio. "It's a one-way trip." "Negative, Pete," Captain Torres replied. "We'll find another way." "No time, sir. Tell my wife I loved her." The radio went silent. Minutes later, the reactor stabilized. Chief Williams had saved the ship and everyone on it. The humans honored him with 60 seconds of complete silence. No talking, no movement. Just respect for a man who chose to die so others could live. Zekthara felt something strange in his chest. His species didn't have words for what humans called grief, but he was beginning to understand the concept. The battle continued. Zekthara watched a human pilot named Danny Walsh fly his damaged fighter directly into a Kralix battleship. The explosion took out both ships, but it saved a transport full of civilians. He watched Sergeant Maria Santos lead a boarding party onto a Kralix vessel. They were outnumbered 4-1, but Santos and her team fought like creatures possessed. They captured the enemy ship through sheer determination and what humans called rage. "Why did they fight so hard when the odds are impossible?" Zekthara asked Dr. Grant as they watched the tactical display. "Because impossible odds don't change what's right," she answered. "Those civilians down there are counting on us. We gave our word to protect them. That means something to humans, even if it cost your lives, especially then." During the night cycle, Zekthara walked through the ship's corridors. He found humans writing letters on paper, actual physical paper. They gave these letters to friends, asking them to deliver the messages if they didn't survive. He found others sitting together in small groups, talking quietly about their homes, their families, their dreams. Some showed pictures of children or spouses. Some shared stories about their lives before the war. None of them talked about retreat. None of them suggested abandoning the civilians. Instead, they planned ways to fight better, to protect more people, to make their deaths count for something. In the medical bay, Zekthara met a wounded fighter pilot named Chloe Martinez. She had burns on half her face and couldn't use her left arm, but she was arguing with the doctors. "I can still fly," she insisted. "My ship just needs new weapons and I'm ready to go." "You need surgery," the doctor replied. "And rest. People are dying out there. Rest can wait." The doctor sedated her against her will. As she fell asleep, she whispered, "Don't let them down. Don't let the bastards win." By the end of the second day, the human fleet had lost 6 ships and hundreds of crew members, but they had also destroyed twice as many Kralix vessels. The evacuation of New Haven was almost complete. Zekthara began to understand something that frightened him. The humans weren't just fighting a battle, they were making a statement. They were showing the galaxy that some things were worth dying for, and somehow, impossibly, they were winning. As he prepared his second report, Zekthara realized he could no longer write with the cold, objective tone his superiors expected. The humans he was watching weren't just military units or tactical assets. They were individuals, each with their own reasons for fighting, their own fears and hopes and dreams. He was beginning to understand why Dr. Grant had said that humans didn't operate on pure tactics. They operated on something much more powerful and much more dangerous. They operated on love. The third day brought news that changed everything. Long-range sensors detected a massive Kralix assault force heading directly for New Haven Colony. Not just a few ships, an entire invasion fleet. "How many?" Admiral Morrison asked, her voice steady despite the terrible numbers appearing on the tactical display. 47 capital ships, sir," Lieutenant Carter reported, "plus support vessels and troop transports. They're planning a full planetary assault." Zekthara looked at the numbers and felt sick. The human fleet had maybe 12 functional ships left. The Kralix force was 4 times larger than anything they had faced so far. "Civilian evacuation status?" the Admiral asked. 60% complete, sir. We need at least 18 more hours to get everyone off planet." 18 hours. The Kralix fleet would arrive in 6. Captain Torres studied the tactical display. "Admiral, we could retreat to the outer system, regroup with reinforcements and return in force." "How long would that take?" 3 weeks minimum. "And the civilians who can't evacuate in time?" Torres was quiet. Everyone knew the answer. The Kralix would enslave them or worse. Admiral Morrison looked around the command center. Every human face showed the same expression, grim determination mixed with fear. They all understood what she was about to say. We hold the line. All ships will take defensive positions around New Haven. We buy those civilians every minute we can. Zekthara wanted to shout that this was insane. You couldn't hold a line against impossible odds. Military logic demanded retreat, regrouping, living to fight another day. But he had learned enough about humans to know that logic wasn't driving this decision. The next few hours passed in frantic preparation. Human ships took positions around the planet. Ground forces, led by Colonel Brandon Hayes, established defensive positions on New Haven's surface. They knew they couldn't win, but they prepared anyway. Zekthara found himself in the shuttle bay, watching human Marines load equipment for the planet's surface. These soldiers were different from the ship crews. Harder, quieter, more focused. They moved like predators preparing for a hunt. You going down to watch the ground fighting? Asked a voice behind him. Zekthara turned to see a young human female in combat armor. She had lieutenant's stripes and carried a large weapon that looked well used. I am Lieutenant Amy Carter, she said. I'm heading down to coordinate with the ground forces. You're welcome to observe from our command post. Is it safe? Carter laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Nothing about this is safe, observer. But you'll get a better view of how humans fight when they're really desperate. The shuttle ride to New Haven's surface was quiet. Carter and her team checked their weapons and equipment repeatedly. Some spoke in low voices to each other. Others just stared out the windows at the planet below. New Haven was beautiful. Green forests, blue oceans, small cities connected by silver roads. It looked peaceful, innocent. It was hard to believe that in a few hours, it would become a battlefield. The human command post was built into a hillside overlooking the main city. Zekthara met Colonel Hayes, a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands. He moved like a fighter, someone who had seen many battles. Observer, the colonel said, shaking Zekthara's hand with a grip that could crush stone. Welcome to New Haven. Sorry you have to see it like this. The colonel showed Zekthara their defensive positions. Human soldiers had dug trenches, set up weapon positions, and prepared obstacles to slow the Kralix advance. Everything looked professional and well organized. It also looked completely inadequate. Sir, reported a sergeant with the name Santos on her uniform, perimeter defenses are ready. All civilian areas have been marked for priority evacuation. Good work, Maria, the colonel replied. How are the men? Scared but ready, sir. They know what's at stake. Zekthara watched human soldiers prepare for battle. They cleaned their weapons, checked their armor, and wrote more of those letters on paper. Some gathered in small groups to pray to their various gods. Others just sat quietly, thinking. What struck him most was their calmness. These humans knew they were about to face an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. They knew most of them would die. But they weren't panicking or running. They were getting ready to fight. Why aren't they afraid? Zekthara asked Dr. Grant, who had come down to the planet to help with medical preparations. Oh, they're terrified, she said while organizing medical supplies. Look closer. Zekthara did look closer. Now he could see it. The way their hands shook slightly when they thought no one was watching. The way they took deeper breaths than normal. The way they kept checking and rechecking their equipment. If they're afraid, why don't they run? Because being afraid doesn't mean you can't be brave. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite being afraid. The Kralix fleet arrived exactly on schedule. Through the command post's windows, Zekthara could see explosions in the sky as the space battle began. The human ships were fighting desperately, but they were being overwhelmed. First wave of dropships detected, reported a technician at a sensor station. Kralix ground forces incoming. Colonel Hayes activated the base's communication system. All units, this is command. Enemy forces are beginning their assault. Remember what we're fighting for. Those civilians are counting on us. Do not let them down. The first Kralix dropships landed beyond the city. Armored vehicles poured out, followed by Kralix soldiers in powered armor. They were bigger than humans, stronger, better equipped. They should have been unstoppable. But the humans had prepared surprises. Hidden weapon positions opened fire as the Kralix advanced. Mines exploded under their vehicles. Human sniper teams picked off their officers from concealed positions. The aliens found themselves fighting not just an army, but an entire planet that refused to give up. Zekthara watched one human soldier, Private Nick Thompson, hold an artillery position alone after his entire squad was killed. He kept firing even after being wounded, even after being shot multiple times. He died at his post, but his weapon kept the Kralix from advancing for 6 crucial hours. He watched Sergeant Santos lead a team to rescue civilians trapped in the city. They fought through Kralix patrols, saved 30 families, and brought them safely to the evacuation ships. Santos herself was wounded twice but refused medical treatment until every civilian was safe. As night fell, the situation became desperate. Half the human defensive positions had been overrun. The space battle was clearly lost. Most of the human fleet was destroyed or disabled. The last evacuation ships were preparing to leave, but the humans kept fighting. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Carter, blood running down her face from a head wound. "We've lost contact with the eastern defensive line. The Kralix are advancing on the spaceport. How many civilians are still down there?" "About 5,000, sir. Mostly families with children." Colonel Hayes looked at the tactical display. The numbers were impossible. But Zekthara was beginning to understand that humans had their own relationship with impossible odds. "Send word to all units," the colonel said. "We hold until the last ship lifts off, no matter what." Through the command post's windows, Zekthara could see explosions getting closer. Kralix forces were only a few kilometers away. Soon, this position would be overrun, but the humans didn't seem to care. They just kept fighting, buying precious minutes for the evacuation ships, buying time with their lives. And Zekthara began to understand that he was watching something that would haunt him forever. The final assault began at dawn. Zekthara watched through the command post's armored windows as Kralix forces surrounded the human positions. The aliens moved with mechanical precision, their weapons cutting down everything in their path. "Last evacuation ship is away," reported Lieutenant Carter, her voice barely audible over the sound of explosions. "All civilians are safe." Colonel Hayes nodded. Around the command post, the remaining human soldiers looked at each other with something Zekthara was learning to recognize. It wasn't resignation or defeat. It was a strange kind of peace that came from knowing they had done their job. "All units, this is command," the colonel announced over the radio. "Mission accomplished. The civilians are safe. It's been an honor serving with all of you." The responses came back from defensive positions around the area, human voices calm despite the chaos around them. "Honor's been ours, sir." "See you on the other side, Colonel." "Tell them we held the line." Zekthara felt something breaking inside his chest. These humans were saying goodbye to each other. They knew they were about to die, and they were being polite about it. "Why aren't you running?" he asked Dr. Grant, who was still treating wounded soldiers even though the medical station would be overrun in minutes. "Where would we run to?" she asked, bandaging a soldier's arm. "The ships are gone. The fleet is destroyed. There's nowhere left to go. But you could surrender. Live as prisoners." Dr. Grant looked up from her patient. "Have you met any Kralix prisoners, Observer?" Zekthara hadn't. In fact, he realized he had never heard of anyone being taken prisoner by the Kralix. "They didn't keep captives, so we fight," Dr. Grant continued. "Because fighting is what humans do when there's nothing left but fighting." The sound of Kralix weapons grew closer. Through his portable scanner, Zekthara could see enemy forces advancing from 3 directions. The human defensive line was collapsing. "Sir," Sergeant Santos reported, running into the command post. Her armor was scorched and she was bleeding from multiple wounds. "Eastern perimeter is gone. Western line just fell. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they reach this position." Colonel Hayes looked around at his remaining people. About 30 humans were left in the command post, most of them wounded. Outside scattered shots suggested a few more defensive positions were still fighting, but not for long. "Ammunition report?" the colonel asked. "Maybe 2 magazines per person," Santos replied. "Some have less. Heavy weapons. 1 rocket launcher. 3 rounds left." The colonel was quiet for a moment. Then he did something that Zekthara would never forget. He smiled. "Well then," Colonel Hayes said, "I guess we do this the hard way." He walked to a weapons locker and pulled out an ancient-looking blade. "A bayonet," Dr. Grant whispered to Zekthara. Other humans did the same, attaching the long knives to their rifles. "What are you doing?" Zekthara asked. "Getting ready for close combat," replied Lieutenant Carter. She had found a rifle somewhere and was fixing her own bayonet to the barrel. "When the ammunition runs out, we fight with these." "That's insane. Kralix warriors are twice your size and wear powered armor." "Yeah," Carter agreed. "But they've never fought humans in hand-to-hand combat. They're about to learn something new. The Kralix reached the command post perimeter. Their weapons fire shattered the windows and blew holes in the walls. Human soldiers fired back from whatever cover they could find. The sound was deafening. Zekthara watched Captain Elena Rodriguez organize the final defense. She moved from position to position, encouraging her soldiers, making sure everyone had ammunition, treating the wounded. She had been shot in the leg, but still moved like a dancer. When they break through that door, she told her people, "We make them earn every step. We make them remember what it cost to fight humans." The Kralix tried to storm the command post 3 times. Each time, human weapons drove them back. But the aliens were learning, adapting their tactics. And the humans were running out of ammunition. "Last magazine," Santos reported. "Rocket launchers empty," called another soldier. "Med supplies are gone," Dr. Grant added. Colonel Hayes looked around at his people. Dirty, wounded, exhausted, but still ready to fight. "It's been a privilege commanding you all," he said. "Now let's show these aliens what humans are made of." That's when Captain Rodriguez made the decision that would haunt Zekthara for the rest of his life. "Fix bayonets," she ordered. "We're going out there." The remaining humans attached their knives to their rifles. Those who had lost their rifles picked up pipes, tools, anything that could be used as a weapon. Dr. Grant grabbed a medical laser that she somehow turned into a cutting tool. "You're going to charge them?" Zekthara asked in horror. "In the open? Against armored enemies with superior weapons?" "Yep," Rodriguez said, checking her rifle one last time. "Doesn't make sense, does it?" "It's suicide." "Maybe. But here's something about humans you should know, observer. When we're cornered, when there's no hope left, when logic says we should quit, that's when we become most dangerous." The captain looked at her soldiers. 30 humans against 300 Kralix warriors. The odds were impossible. "Remember what we're fighting for," she said. "Those civilians are safe because of what we did here. Their children will grow up free because we held this line. That means something. That's worth dying for." She raised her rifle and pointed it toward the door. "For humanity! For humanity!" The other humans shouted back. And then they did something that broke every rule of military logic that Zekthara had ever learned. They opened the door and charged straight into the enemy. What happened next would be burned into Zekthara's memory forever. The humans ran directly at the Kralix formation, screaming, their bayonets gleaming in the morning light. They should have been slaughtered in seconds. Instead, something impossible occurred. The Kralix, despite their superior numbers and equipment, began to falter. These warriors had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced anything like this. They had never encountered beings who attacked with such desperate fury, who fought like they had nothing left to lose. Captain Rodriguez reached the Kralix line first. Zekthara watched her bayonet pierce alien armor, watched her fight hand-to-hand with creatures twice her size. She lasted almost a full minute before falling. Sergeant Santos was right behind her, followed by Lieutenant Carter and a young soldier named Danny Walsh. They fought like demons, like creatures possessed by something beyond rational thought. The Kralix began to retreat. It made no sense. They had every advantage. But something about the human charge, something about their willingness to die for principles that didn't even translate into Kralix language, broke the aliens psychologically. Within 10 minutes, the entire Kralix force was in full retreat. They had won the battle, destroyed the human fleet, conquered the planet, but they were running from 30 humans with knives. Zekthara sat in the ruined command post surrounded by bodies and tried to understand what he had witnessed. His scanner showed that the Kralix were withdrawing from the entire system. A victory that should have taken them days had turned into a defeat because they couldn't comprehend what they had faced. As rescue ships arrived hours later, Zekthara realized that he needed to change his report completely. The humans hadn't just lost a battle. They had demonstrated something that would change how the entire galaxy viewed warfare. They had shown that some things were more powerful than logic, more dangerous than superior firepower. They had shown that courage could be contagious even across species lines. 3 months later, Zekthara sat in his quarters aboard a research station far from any conflict zones. His formal report to the Confederation Intelligence Division remained unfinished on his computer. Every time he tried to write it, the words wouldn't come. How do you explain the impossible? How do you describe watching a species fight beyond all logic, all reason, all hope? How do you tell your superiors that humans don't follow the same rules as everyone else in the galaxy? The door chime interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Dr. Grant walked in carrying 2 cups of something that smelled pleasant. She had survived the final battle, rescued along with 7 other humans when the relief fleet finally arrived. Most of her left arm was artificial now, but she moved with the same calm confidence he remembered. "Thought you might like some coffee," she said, setting a cup on his desk. "Human drink. Helps with thinking." Sekthara took a careful sip. It was bitter but somehow comforting. "Why are you here, Doctor?" "The survivors are being debriefed on Earth. I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing with your report." "I cannot write it." Dr. Grant sat down across from him. She looked older now, more tired. The battle had aged all of them. "Why not?" "Because no one will believe it. My people understand warfare as a logical process. You calculate odds, weigh advantages, make rational decisions. But humans—" He paused, struggling with words his language couldn't properly express. "Humans fight with their hearts. And that scares you." "Yes." The admission came easier than he expected. "I have watched your species do things that should be impossible. I have seen humans die for abstract concepts that have no tactical value. I have watched you charge into certain death because you believed it was right." Dr. Grant was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about your people, Sekthara. How do the Vorthak handle war?" "Efficiently. We calculate probabilities, assess resources, negotiate terms. We fight when victory is assured and retreat when it is not. We preserve our forces and minimize casualties." "Sounds logical." "It is logical. It is how intelligent species should behave. And yet the Kralliks retreated from New Haven." Sekthara set down his coffee cup. This was the part that haunted him most. "The Kralliks had won, completely. They destroyed your fleet, conquered your planet, eliminated your military forces. By every logical measure, the battle was over. But they left. An entire invasion force, triumphant and unopposed, abandoned their conquest and withdrew from human space." Dr. Grant smiled sadly. "Because they realized something, didn't they? They realized that conquering humanity would require fighting humans. Not just defeating human military forces, but facing human civilians, human children, human families, all of whom would fight like the soldiers at New Haven, all of whom would choose death over surrender. And the cost of that conquest?" Sekthara felt that strange tightness in his chest again. "Would be unacceptable. The Kralliks are warriors, but they are not insane. They could conquer human space, but it would take decades and cost them their entire military. Every human world would be another New Haven. Every human city would be another last stand." He stood and walked to his quarters viewing port. Space looked peaceful from here, empty and quiet. But he knew that wasn't true anymore. Now he knew what was really out there. "The war ended because the Kralliks decided that humans were too dangerous to fight," he continued. "Not because you are strong, but because you are willing to die for things that don't make sense. Like freedom. Like protecting children. Like keeping promises to strangers. Yes, and that terrifies me." Dr. Grant joined him at the viewing port. "Want to know a secret, Sekthara? It terrifies us too." "What do you mean? Do you think Elena Rodriguez wanted to die? Do you think Colonel Hayes enjoyed watching his people get killed? Do you think any of us wanted to be heroes?" Sekthara looked at her, confused. "We were all scared," Dr. Grant explained. "We all wanted to live, to go home, to see our families again. But sometimes being human means doing things that scare you. Sometimes it means choosing other people's lives over your own." "Why?" "Because if we don't, who will? If humans won't fight for human children, who else is going to do it?" They stood together in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Dr. Grant spoke again. "The galaxy has changed, hasn't it?" Sekthara nodded. "The news of New Haven has spread. Other species are asking questions about human military doctrine. Some are expressing interest in defensive alliances. The Kralliks have been more cautious in their expansion plans. And your people are reconsidering their assumptions about warfare, about the value of emotion in combat, about the tactical applications of what humans call courage." Dr. Grant laughed softly. "Be careful, observer. Start thinking like humans and you might end up making decisions that don't make sense. I am afraid it is too late for that." After Dr. Grant left, Sekthara returned to his computer. But instead of his official report, he began writing something else. A personal account. A record of names and faces and final words. He wrote about Chief Engineer Pete Williams, who died alone to save his ship. He wrote about Captain Elena Rodriguez, who led a hopeless charge because someone had to. He wrote about Private Nick Thompson, who held his position for 6 hours after everyone else was dead. He wrote about Sergeant Maria Santos, who rescued civilians while wounded. He wrote about Dr. Grant, who treated patients even as the walls collapsed around her. He wrote about Colonel Hayes, who smiled when facing impossible odds. He wrote about all of them, because someone should remember. Someone should know what they did and why they did it. When he finished, Zekathara sent 2 reports to his superiors. The first was brief and technical. Human military forces proved more effective than anticipated. Recommend avoiding direct confrontation. The second was marked for the Confederation Council's highest security classification. It was longer, more detailed, and concluded with a warning. The humans are not like us. They do not fight as we fight. They do not calculate as we calculate. They make decisions based on principles that cannot be quantified or predicted. They are willing to die for concepts that exist only in their minds. This makes them incredibly dangerous, not because they are strong, but because they are unpredictable. They will fight battles they cannot win for reasons they cannot explain to species that operate on logic. We have survived as a galactic civilization by following rational principles. Preserve resources, minimize risk, maximize advantage. The humans follow different principles. Protect the innocent, honor commitments, never abandon hope. These 2 philosophies are incompatible. Contact with humanity will force every species to choose between logic and something the humans call morality. I fear what that choice will do to us all. Zeki. Thara sealed the report and transmitted it through secure channels. Then he submitted his request for permanent reassignment to a research station far from human space. But he knew it wouldn't help. You can't run from memories. You can't forget watching beings choose death over dishonor. You can't stop thinking about the look in human eyes when they decide that some things are worth dying for. In his final personal log, Zekathara wrote, "I was sent to observe humans in battle, and I regret it. Not because they lost. They won in ways that matter more than victory. I regret it because I learned something I was never meant to know. I learned that courage is real. I learned that some things are more important than survival. I learned that beings can choose to die for strangers and call it honor. The humans have infected me with their madness. Now I understand why the Kraliks retreated. It's not because humans are strong. It's because human strength comes from places that don't make sense, can't be measured, and refuse to be defeated. The galaxy will never be the same, and neither will I." Outside his viewing port, the stars shone peacefully in the darkness, but Zekathara knew the truth now. Somewhere out there, humans were watching those same stars and making promises to protect them. And that thought somehow was both terrifying and comforting at the same time.